Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. The law is clear, Mrs. Williams. Intent doesn't matter. These words silenced the courtroom as a mother's tear-stained face crumpled in despair. The prosecutor's voice sliced through the air, cold and precise, while flashbulbs captured her trembling hands. Sarah Williams stood alone, her shoulders hunched beneath her faded blue blazer, the weight of 5 potential years in prison crushing her spirit. "I only wanted to save my son," she whispered, her voice barely reaching the first row of spectators. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras panned across her face, and the judge's expression remained stoic behind his bench. Outside, rain pattered against tall courthouse windows as justice prepared to follow its blind course. In the back of the courtroom, a side door opened silently. A man in sunglasses paused, hand still on the handle. His presence went unnoticed as the prosecutor demanded the full 5-year sentence as prescribed by law. But Robert Downey Jr. had heard enough, and what happened next would change everything. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. The Metropolitan Courthouse buzzed with activity that rainy Tuesday morning. Courtroom 4B, with its polished oak benches and fluorescent lighting, had transformed into an arena where a mother's desperation collided with the cold machinery of justice. Sarah Williams, 35, stood with reddened eyes fixed on the tiled floor. Her son, only 8 years old, had needed emergency surgery 2 months ago, a procedure their insurance wouldn't cover. In desperation, she had used her ex-husband's credit card, still in her possession after their bitter divorce. "Theft is theft," Assistant District Attorney Jameson continued, straightening his expensive tie. "A 5-year sentence would send the appropriate message about financial crimes in our county." His voice carried the confident tone of someone who had never faced impossible choices. Behind him, junior attorneys nodded in practiced unison, while in the gallery, reporters captured every word for the evening news. Sarah's public defender, looking exhausted and overwhelmed, shuffled through papers at the defense table. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges using the card, but the circumstances were extraordinary. Her son needed life-saving surgery." His voice lacked the prosecutor's commanding presence, almost drowned out by the rustling of papers and whispered commentary from spectators. Judge Harmon frowned, fingers steepled before him. His eyes, shadowed by 30 years on the bench, moved from Sarah to the prosecution. "The law doesn't provide exceptions for good intentions, counselor." The room seemed to grow colder with his words. Sarah's shoulders began to shake as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. A court officer shifted uncomfortably, while in the gallery, opinions divided. Some faces hardened with judgment, others softened with sympathy. The courtroom had become a microcosm of society itself, weighing justice against mercy, rules against compassion. Meanwhile, in Courtroom 6A, Robert Downey Jr. had just finished testifying in a copyright case involving one of his films. Having completed his obligation, he stepped into the hallway, removing his signature-tinted glasses and running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Which way to the exit?" he asked a passing clerk who pointed down the corridor. As he walked, snippets of conversation and proceedings leaked through partially open doors. Court business as usual. When he passed Courtroom 4B, the door stood slightly ajar. He caught fragments that made him pause. Emergency surgery, her son, 5 years. Something in those words resonated deeply. Robert had battled his own demons, faced his own legal troubles years ago. He knew what it meant to stand before a judge, life hanging in the balance. Without conscious decision, his hand pushed against the heavy wooden door. He entered silently, taking a position at the back just as the prosecutor declared, "The law demands consequences, regardless of her motherly instincts. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching." The judge looked down at Sarah Williams, his expression a practiced neutrality that had sentenced thousands before her. "Mrs. Williams, do you have anything further to say before I render my decision?" His voice echoed in the now hushed courtroom. Every eye focused on the trembling woman who seemed to shrink under the collective gaze. "I dot," Sarah's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I knew it was wrong. But when the doctor said my son could die without the surgery and the insurance denied us," she paused, struggling to maintain composure. "I would do anything to save my child. Anything." The raw honesty in her voice cut through the formal atmosphere. Even the prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, though his expression remained resolute. Judge Harmon nodded, his face betraying a momentary flicker of sympathy before returning to judicial stoniness. "While I understand the difficult position you were in, Mrs. Williams, the law is quite clear on unauthorized use of financial instruments." He began citing statutes and precedents, his tone growing increasingly mechanical. At the back of the courtroom, Robert Downey Jr. felt his jaw tighten. The actor recognized the rhythm of a system preparing to consume another life in its gears. Robert's presence had not gone entirely unnoticed. Whispers rippled through the back rows as recognition dawned. A courthouse security officer did a double-take, then tried to maintain his professional demeanor. A few spectators surreptitiously raised phones to capture the moment, but the gravity of the proceedings kept most attention focused forward. The prosecutor was now in full rhetorical flight. "Your Honor, we cannot allow emotional appeals to undermine our legal framework. Mrs. Williams made a deliberate choice to commit fraud." His words seemed to physically push Sarah down. She gripped the table edge to steady herself. Something stirred in Robert, a memory of his own darkest days when mercy had meant everything. The actor who had portrayed Tony Stark, who had himself been given second chances when the system could have crushed him, felt something both personal and universal rising within. Without fully planning what he would do, he began moving forward, past the rows of spectators. The movement caught the judge's eye mid-sentence. "Excuse me, sir. Court is in session," the bailiff began, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. But the celebrity's confident stride and purposeful expression caused the officer to hesitate just long enough. "Your Honor," Robert's distinctive voice carried through the courtroom, silencing all other sounds. "May I approach the bench?" The question, polite yet somehow non-negotiable, hung in the air. A collective gasp swept through the gallery as people fully registered who had just spoken. Judge Harmon's eyebrows shot upward, momentarily forgetting protocol in his surprise. "Mr. Downey." The name emerged as a question, though there was no doubt about the identity of the man now standing in the center aisle. "I apologize for the interruption," Robert continued, his voice carrying the same magnetic quality that had captivated audiences worldwide. "But I believe I have information relevant to this case." It wasn't strictly true, but he needed an opening. Sarah turned, her tear-streaked face registering confusion, then shock as she recognized him. The prosecutor's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. The public defender looked as though he might faint. Court reporters frantically scribbled, unable to believe their luck at witnessing whatever was about to unfold. "This is highly irregular," the judge managed, but curiosity overrode procedural concerns. "Approach." With one word, he changed the course of what had seemed a predetermined outcome. Robert moved forward with the confidence of a man who had faced both adoring crowds and prison cells. This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below and let's talk. The hushed courtroom waited as Robert Downey Jr. stood before the bench, his expression serious in a way rarely captured by entertainment photographers. Judge Harmon leaned forward, microphone temporarily muted, as the actor spoke in low tones. The prosecutor edged closer, attempting to overhear, while Sarah remained frozen in place, barely breathing. "Your Honor," Robert began after the brief private exchange, his voice now addressing the entire courtroom. "I'd like to speak as someone who has stood where Mrs. Williams stands now." The statement landed with force. Everyone present knew his history with the law. "I was given second chances when many believed I didn't deserve them." He turned slightly, acknowledging the watching crowd. "Many years ago, I faced judges who could have thrown away the key. Instead, I was given opportunities to rebuild." His voice carried emotion that couldn't be manufactured, the authenticity of someone who had lived through both fame and disgrace. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, while we all respect Mr. Downey's work, this emotional appeal has no legal standing. The defendant committed fraud, regardless of—" "With respect," Robert interrupted with the timing of a seasoned performer, "this isn't about emotion. It's about justice versus punishment." He turned toward Sarah, making eye contact for the first time. "I don't know Mrs. Williams, but I know what it means to face impossible choices." He addressed the judge again. "Your Honor, the law provides for discretion precisely because human lives aren't legal abstractions. They're messy, complicated, and sometimes desperate." His words resonated through the silent room, cameras capturing every gesture. "The purpose of our justice system isn't to destroy lives, but to protect them. This woman didn't steal for luxury or greed. She stole because our healthcare system failed her child." Robert's voice grew stronger, echoing the moral certainty that had defined his most beloved characters. "I'm not asking you to ignore the law. I'm asking you to fulfill its highest purpose." Sarah stared at him, tears flowing freely now. The public defender looked stunned at this unexpected advocacy. Even the judge seemed moved, his judicial mask slipping to reveal the human beneath. Robert reached inside his jacket and produced a checkbook. The simple action silenced even the whispers. "Your Honor, I'd like to make restitution for the full amount Mrs. Williams used, plus appropriate interest." He glanced at the prosecutor. Would that satisfy the financial harm component of this case? The prosecutor appeared conflicted, caught between procedure and the unexpected turn of events. "Technically, yes, but—" "Furthermore," Robert continued, "I'm prepared to establish a fund for her son's ongoing medical needs." He turned to address Sarah directly. "And to create a foundation to help other parents facing similar impossible choices." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Reporters typed frantically on their phones. The judge rapped his gavel once, restoring order. "Mr. Downey," Judge Harmon said, his tone softer than before, "while I appreciate your generosity, I must consider the legal parameters of this case." He paused, looking at the trembling mother. "However, first-time offenders with mitigating circumstances do have options under our statutes." The judge's expression suggested an internal struggle between the letter and spirit of the law, a battle that Robert's intervention had influenced decisively. "It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it." The courthouse steps bustled with activity as reporters jostled for position. Camera flashes punctuated the gray afternoon as Robert Downey Jr. emerged with Sarah Williams beside him. Her face, still showing traces of tears, now held something new. Hope. Mrs. Williams has accepted a deferred prosecution agreement, Robert announced to the assembled press. She'll complete community service hours at the children's hospital where her son was treated. His arm rested lightly on her shoulder, a gesture of support that spoke volumes. Behind them, the public defender looked shell-shocked but pleased, clutching his briefcase like he couldn't quite believe what had transpired. Sometimes the law needs to remember its purpose, Robert continued, his voice carrying over the crowd. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about making things right. Cameras clicked frantically as he spoke, capturing words that would soon trend across social media platforms worldwide. Sarah stood straighter now, her dignity returning with each passing moment. A week later, Robert sat across from a major network interviewer, the courthouse incident having exploded into a national conversation. You could have simply written a check privately, the interviewer noted. Why make such a public stand? Robert's expression turned thoughtful. Some systems only change when their flaws are exposed to light. He leaned forward slightly. Every day, parents face impossible choices between financial ruin and their children's health. My involvement got attention, but the issue was always bigger than one case. The interview cut to footage of the newly announced Downey Medical Justice Foundation, which had already raised millions. Sarah Williams had been hired as its first advocate, her experience now transformed into purpose. The camera returned to Robert's face as he described how his own journey through the justice system had shaped his perspective. Second chances matter, he said simply, and sometimes it takes someone who's been given one to recognize when another person deserves the same opportunity. The story continued to resonate long after the initial headlines faded. Sarah's son, now recovered, appeared alongside Robert at a charity gala, his small hand clutched in the actor's as they discussed expanding healthcare access for vulnerable families. Legal scholars debated the case in journal articles, while public discourse increasingly questioned the intersection of justice, healthcare, and compassion. Judge Harmon later admitted to a legal publication that the case had changed his approach to the bench. Mr. Downey reminded me that behind every case file is a human story, he said. That's something judges can sometimes forget after years of processing cases. In Hollywood, the incident added new depth to Robert's already legendary status, not just as an actor who had overcome personal demons, but as someone who used his platform to create real-world change. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurred in Sarah Williams herself, who now spoke confidently to lawmakers and medical boards about systemic reform. One person standing up can change everything, she often said in her presentations. Robert Downey Jr. taught me that. Now I'm teaching others. Wow, what a story. If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.